Hi. I think it's just about 10. My clock over there, I think, is just a little off. So I'll give it another few seconds. So if folks are waiting till 10 to come, then I'll wait till 10 to start. So hi, everybody. Say hi so I know who's here tonight. Tonight we're going all the way back to the beginning, to the origin, to where it all began. There, I just was super redundant like 3 or 4 times. Let me get a little sip of, here, cheers to you on a Sunday night, and cheers to spooky Sunday nights, right? All right, so today I'm going to tell you, and everybody's been begging, well, not everybody, but people who know have been begging for these stories since the first night I told stories. So this is the story, these are the stories of where I grew up in Chicago. I was born in Chicago in the middle of the last century. Oh my God, that sounds so long ago, because it is. I was born, when I was born, my folks were in this little tiny apartment, and my older brother and sister lived there. They had boom, 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 baby after baby after baby. And they were in this like 1 bedroom, I think, and there were cribs everywhere, and there were diapers everywhere. And my great-grandmother lived in a great big house, a big 5-bedroom house. 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 4-bedroom house. I don't know. A nice big house with lots of bedrooms, 2 floors, the whole 9 yards, right next to my grandmother's house. But my great-grandmother lived there. Well, when I was just a few months old, my 90-year-old great-grandmother was not able to take care of herself in this house with these big long stairs and everything. And so she was moved up to a rest home outside of Madison by her oldest daughter, Teresa. Now, when the house became empty, this is my father's family, and his uncles and his mother all thought, well, geez, maybe Davy can rent the house, and then we don't have to worry about having some stranger living there. So my mom and dad started renting the house on Pensacola Avenue in Chicago, right next door to my grandma Shippers. And they moved there when I was just a few months old. I was not even a year yet. So as soon as I became aware of my surroundings other than my mother's face, I was in this house. And this house was a very interesting place. This house was a place that was alive with spirits. It had so much energy in it, and it was very disturbing energy, but as a little toddler, when you don't know anything else, you just take what's around you as your reality. So if I was growing up in the middle of, Tibet and living in a yurt or something, someplace, that would be my reality. But I was born into a haunted house, and so that was my reality. The house had been as I said, my great-grandmother's. It was bought for her by her mother as a wedding present for her and her husband. The house had been built by some brothers that were named the Davidson brothers. Very little was known about them. The only stories that I recall hearing, and even in recent years when I asked my dad about them, the only thing he remembered is that he knew they weren't very good people. But I said, well, what does that mean? They weren't very good people. And he said, well, I don't know. They worked for the city. They were politicians after the fire, and there was a lot of corruption. And he told me that so maybe they stole some money and had to get out of town, because what happened was their attorney sold the house to my great-great-grandmother, who then gifted it to her daughter and her new husband. But I know a little bit about Chicago history in that time, and it's curious to think that someone who actually stole money or took bribes and kickbacks would feel that they had to leave town because everybody was doing it and making a killing on all that stuff. Anyway, the Davidson brothers apparently left town and left this beautiful home to be sold to my great-great-grandma, who gave it to my great-grandma and her husband, as I've said several times now. My grandmother was born there, as were her siblings. My great-aunt Teresa, then my grandma Angela, her brothers Tom, Gerald, and Jack, Joe and Jack were all born there. And my grandmother lived in a little bungalow next door to this house. So as a toddler, I was a really early speaker. I got language before I could crawl, is what they tell me. Now, one of the things I know about child development and language development is that memory can start once you have language. I'm sure you could hypnotize back to pre-language, but once you have language and are telling your story, then you have memories. And I have to tell you, I have really early memories. I have no idea why I remember all this stuff so vividly, but I do. I remember things all the way back to when I was 2 years old. I remember not everything when I was 2, but I do remember being a flower girl when I was 2. For my godmother, Patricia Ann, we shared a birthday, and I remember vividly shopping for the dress. I know what it felt like. I remember what it looked like. I remember how I spun around in this big giant dressing room with mirrors all around and with all the bridesmaids and everybody in their fancy clothes, and I even had ruffly underpants. It was so awesome. And I remember walking down the aisle and not wanting to toss the little rose petals into the aisle of the church because they smelled so good and they were pink and I loved them. And so I walked down and refused to put the petals down, and my mother was sitting up front and going like this. And I knew she wanted me to drop those petals, but I wanted to keep them, so I pretended I didn't know and I just waved to her. I kind of do that to this day. I also remember keeping that basket with those petals for a long time. And then the kid across the street took them. He was kind of a bully, and he pulled them out of my hand and he threw the basket into the middle of the street. Now, we were not allowed to go into the street, and so I sat on the curb crying my eyes out as he went across the street to his house. And when our neighbor came out, she found out what happened, and she got my basket for me, and then she went across the street, and I heard her talking to the kid's mom, and the next thing I heard was a beating happening across the street. It was kind of traumatic. But anyway, so I remember things from when I was very small. Some of my first memories in the house are sitting on the living room floor and just playing with things, and the first time I really became aware that there was something other than the living people in the house, that there was something beyond that, was hearing my name called. And at first it was called from kind of far away, and I turned to look, and my brother and sister were still playing with their toys, and my parents were off in the kitchen arguing or something. They did that a lot. And I couldn't figure out who was calling me, but they didn't look like they heard anything. And so I just went back to playing, and then I felt it right here and right in my ear. It said my name, like this whisper, this like guttural whisper. Calling my name in my ear. And I jumped and I looked around and there wasn't anything there, and it was uncomfortable, but it's weird, it just didn't freak me out so much. It was just uncomfortable. And I kind of moved away from it a little bit. And then I remembered all the time hearing my name called. We all heard our names called. You'd be like, there were times when I thought my mom was calling me from the kitchen and go in to see what she wanted, and she hadn't called me. There were times when somebody called from the hall by the stairs, and there was nobody there. There were times when it was a familiar voice, and there were times when it was not a familiar voice. There were times when it was a voice that didn't even sound like a person, that it was like a whisper voice that was like this, and just really fast, DI. And it would just like wake me from whatever I was doing. And this happened all the time. So in the middle of playing with your dolls or with anything at all, something was always pulling you away, DI, and getting your attention. And this created a level of tension. Attention creates tension that just kind of grew and grew. So we were always on guard. As I got older, like a preschooler, that older, like 4 years old, things were very clear. I have lots and lots of memories of that time. The house was, the way it was set up was on the main floor. It had a big front porch in front with stairs that went up. I don't know how many stairs were there, but then you'd go in the front door, and directly in front of you were stairs going upstairs. And the kind of upstairs it was you would look up the staircase, and there was a railing. There was the wall and then the railing that went around, and it curved on the top, and you could look and see the whole hallway upstairs and all the doors to the upstairs rooms. I don't know if you've ever seen a hallway and a stairs like that, but I guess it was pretty typical for houses built in the 1870s. Late 1870s. This house, as it turns out, was the first house built in the Portage Park area of Chicago. I did a little research on it. First house built there. And so then upstairs, there was a little room at the top of the stairs, and then this little short hallway that went into another door to a small bedroom. And then if you followed the hallway around, straight ahead was a bathroom door, and then to the left was a bedroom door, and that was like the master bedroom. It was like an L-shaped room, and the bathroom had a door both to the hallway and to that room. And we all slept in that room. My parents slept in the room at the other side of the hall, and they just put all our beds in there, and I shared a bed with my little sister Annie. Now, we would get in bed, we'd get tucked in, and we would never, ever want to be alone at night. We wouldn't want to be alone ever any place in that house, but night was like, that was way worse. When we would get in bed and my mom would kiss us goodnight and turn out the light, she always left the bathroom light on so that you could see it was not pitch dark. But once we settled in, we started to see this regular apparition. She would come in extremely predictable intervals. And she looked like, she would start out, we'd first see her walking past the door toward the bathroom, from the stairs toward the bathroom. And when she walked, you could see her front outline, her whole silhouette. And she didn't seem like a very big woman, but it was a woman, and I could tell she had long, thick hair. And she was just wearing, you could see the front outline of her very clearly, and wearing this long white gown of some kind. I know it's a cliche that a ghost wears a white nightgown, but this chick was. And she would take a step, and when she took a step, these light tracers. You know how when you move a camera, have you seen where it's like little, where there's little tracers of light that would follow? So she would take a step, and then the light would catch up to her. And then she'd take another step, and it would spread out. When she took the step, the light would spread out and then catch up. And when I was a kid, this was right when Slinkies came out, and they made these really dangerous toys that maimed children all the time, that had the front body and head of a wiener dog, and then this slinky in between, and then this backside of it, and you're supposed to pull it along, and it would stretch out and come together, and it was great. But boy, oh boy, those steel slinkies were sliced off multiple digits, I believe, over time. But we called her the Slinky Lady because as she moved, she stretched out and then came back in. And she'd stretch out and join herself again. And we'd watch her go by, and she never really interacted with us. She never turned and looked at us. And I remember all of us sitting there, and if any of my siblings that were in that house at that time are on this, you just say, yes, it happened, because we would all sit in the beds and just watch her go by. And then after several seconds, you could count out how long it was going to take her to have her face appear on the other side, going back towards the stairs, and she would walk, and her body would catch up. And she'd step, and the light would catch. And then she'd disappear again, down the stairs, down the hall, down somewhere. And then, at the exact same interval of time, once again, you'd see her face appear in the doorway, her front silhouette, and she'd step and spread out and catch up, and spread out and catch up. All the time, every single night, every single day. When we would be put upstairs to take naps, there she'd be in the daylight. This was not just a nighttime apparition. Now, during the day when we were playing and busy, we didn't really pay attention to her, but when we were in that room upstairs, or we were going to be on those stairs, we were very mindful about where she was. I remember one night, Kate, I see you're on here, Kate woke me up, and she had to go to the bathroom, and she woke me up saying that she didn't go to the bathroom before she went to bed, and would I watch for her. Now, the bathroom, her bed was right near the bathroom. The light was on, but I didn't even ask why. I knew why. And so I said, okay, so she climbed up on the bed, and we were both like shivering. I don't even know if it was cold, but we were both shivering under the covers, watching for the Slinky Lady. And here she came into the door, spread out, and her body caught up into the bathroom. And we waited, and we waited, and then she appeared on the other side of the door and started to move. And once she disappeared, I said, go. And she ran like a bat out of hell into that bathroom. I could hear her going to the bathroom. She didn't even bother to close the door, but I was not looking in the bathroom. I was watching the hallway, counting. 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. I kept counting. 4, 1,000, 5, 1,000. Hurry up, Kate. 6, 1,000. It's busting up every once in a while. She came flying out of that bathroom, jumped into her bed, and it was like a split second later that once again, here comes the Slinky Lady's face. And then she catches up. And then we counted again and waited till she went the other way. Watched her until we fell asleep. She was almost a comfort, It was like, it was always there, something that was always there. You could count on it. You could count on it. I remember one night when Annie and I shared a bed, my sister Annie. I really liked sharing a bed with somebody. I've almost never in my whole life had my own bed, but that's okay. I suppose. I've never had my own room. But we shared a bed, and it was summer because it was still light out. Either that or my mother just put us to bed really early because she was exhausted. And my poor mother, worked like a dog. She had one child after another every 5 years. My entire recollection of my mother from my childhood is her pregnant with a baby on her hip, and she's stirring something on the stove or doing something or she had an 8-foot cane pole that she had on the back of the couch. So if she was holding the baby and we started messing around, she'd grab that cane pole from behind the couch, go and bop us on top of the head. We called her the General. My grandpa, her father, called her the General too. But she worked from all the time. Nobody ever thinks their parents work hard, but man, this woman worked hard. My father would be at work, and then later he went to night school, so she was pretty much on her own with 5 little kids, one after another, 5 kids under 5, and just doing everything. So this one night, she put us to bed, and it was still light out, and she was ready for us to go to bed. But we, of course, had another idea, and so we waited till she disappeared, and we waited and we listened carefully, watching the Slinky Lady. And we heard my mom go down the steps. My mother never waited for the Slinky Lady. That always kind of concerned me, because we would always wait for the Slinky Lady, because like I say, she never looked at us, but we just knew not to get in her way, not to run into her ever. So this one night, we were in bed, it's light out. We hear her go all the way downstairs. We hear her go to the back of the house, the kitchen. She was probably doing the dinner dishes. She probably had it and put us to bed at 6:30. Who knows? That's what I would have done. But so then we started messing around, and we're playing and we're jumping on the bed. Keep it down, Kate would tell us. Shh, don't wake up Mama. She's gonna come up and give us all a licking. So we're jumping from bed to bed and giggling and carrying on and doing all this stuff. And Annie was sitting on the bed, and Annie had these big dark eyes. She had they were just like these huge eyes, and she was tiny. She was even littler than her younger sister. She was a little thing. She must have been about 2.5, maybe 3 years old. And we're playing and minding our own business, and all of a sudden she's looking in the corner of the room. And in the front of the room, there was a double window in the front, and then the corner, and then the bathroom door next to that. And she was looking in the corner between the windows and the bathroom wall. And she's crying. And we said, "What's wrong? Are you okay?" And Kate gets all mad at us, like, "Did you jump on her?" And I'm like, "No, I didn't even touch her. I swear. Mom's gonna hear her, and she's gonna come up here and murder us all." And I said, "I didn't do anything." And we're all like, we didn't. I swear, we didn't do anything. Well, Annie keeps staring at the corner of this room. She does not take her eyes off, and I don't even know if she blinked. And she's crying, and she started saying, "Go get Mommy, go get Mommy." And we're looking, what is it? What's going on? She says, "Go get Mommy, go get Mommy." And she's getting more and more upset. And so we're all starting to freak out. Now, she was clearly seeing something, but none of us could see it, but that didn't mean anything. I mean, we all saw things that that other people couldn't see all the time. So if somebody saw something, you just believed them, because chances are it was the real deal. So we're like, okay, we'll go get Mommy. And we all fixed our eyes on that bedroom door, waiting for the Slinky Lady. And we waited, and we waited, and we waited, and she didn't come. And it was way past the time. Now, meanwhile, Annie is starting to hyperventilate, and she's just getting more upset, and she has not unfixed her gaze from that corner. And we're all starting to cry, too. It's like, "Oh, no, what are we going to do? We're trapped up here." And Dave, my brother, brave Dave, he says, "I'll go get Mommy." And we're like, "Oh!" And he jumped out of the bed, ran through the hall, swung around that railing, went flying down those stairs, screaming all the way down, "Mommy, Mommy." Well, first we tried calling her. We were yelling, "Mommy, Mommy," and she didn't hear us at all. She was probably sitting on the back porch having a cigarette, or had gone next door to talk to my grandma. So she used to leave us there and go next door. Anyway, he goes running down the stairs, screaming for her, and in just a few minutes, the two of them come running back up the stairs. And my mom looks at Annie, and she is just sobbing and heaving, and my mom picked her up and sat down in the bed, and we all clung to my mother. We were all like freaking out. And she picked Annie up, and as she picked her up, she turned her body, but Annie's head did not look away from that corner. And my mom put her on her lap and said, Annie, what's wrong? Are you sick? And she said, Mommy, there's a man in the corner. Tell him to go away. There's a man in the corner. And we're all looking at the corner and like, dude, we haven't seen a man in the corner yet. What the heck? And my mom goes, there's nobody in the corner. And she says, he's there, he's there. And my mom said, Annie, you must have been dreaming. And we're all like, dude, we weren't dreaming. We were jumping on the beds. We didn't say that. But we knew that she was not dreaming. And my mom said, it's nothing. There's nothing there. Look, I'll show you. And she sat Annie down on the bed next to me. And we're all like in this pile. We're all like clung on each other. We were a little bundle of shippers' kids in a pile on the one bed. And my brave, amazing, courageous mother walks over to the corner of that room, flings her arms around in the corner, and says, look, there's nothing here. There's nothing. You probably just saw a shadow. Well, Annie lets out this yelp and leaps out of the bed. She runs into the bathroom, and my mother's standing in the corner. We're all watching her. We're all like horrified. What the hell is Annie doing? She ran into the bathroom, and we jumped out of bed and followed her. Now, the way the bathroom was there was a bathtub, and at the head of the bathtub, or the foot or something, it was the head of the bathtub, there was a linen closet, and all the sheets and towels were in that linen closet. Well, Annie goes running into that bathroom, tears open that linen closet, and starts pulling things out, towels and sheets. And my mother says, Annie, stop that, knock it off. And she picks her up, and Annie's yelling, he went in here. I'm going to find him and show you. He went in here. He went in here. And my mother said, now just stop this nonsense. That's enough for tonight. Just knock it off. It was nothing. Just get back in bed. So we all got back in bed. And my mother stayed with us till we went to sleep. I don't know why, but I'm glad she did. And she sat on Annie's and my bed, which made me extra happy. And she stroked Annie's hair, and every once in a while she'd stroke mine. And she'd sing to us. And pretty soon I fell asleep. So the next morning, when we saw my dad, we told him about the man in the corner. And my dad said, oh, I know who that must have been. That must have been the leprechaun that has been following around Grandma Lyons since she tricked him out of a wish and his shillelagh. I'll bet it was the leprechaun. Annie, you probably saw the leprechaun. We're like, oh, a leprechaun. Yay! Annie saw a leprechaun. That's so cool. Too bad we didn't know it was a leprechaun. We could have had a wish out of the thing. Well, for years we talked about how Annie saw the leprechaun and how the leprechaun ran into the linen closet. And that just made perfect sense. But later on, after we moved out and we were looking at piles and piles and piles of pictures, there were a whole bunch that didn't have names on them. Most of the photos, when we moved out, we took a bunch of boxes of photos. When we first moved out, my Uncle Gerald and his family moved in right after us, and they were there for a few years, not real long. But when we were teenagers, after the house was being sold out of the family, boxes of photos came in. And there were several that we didn't know, and we'd show my mom, and if she didn't know, she'd say, put them on the coffee table for when your father gets home. I was so impressed by how he remembered everything. He could look at a photograph and say, okay, this was Bootsy's first communion, so this must be 19, whatever year it was. And then sorry, it keeps going out. I guess a lot of people are doing Facebook Live these days. She'd write the name and date on the back. So she didn't know. We came across this one picture, and we were always teasing each other. My brother Dave had this crazy hair, and he was trying to grow a hippie beard, and he had like a few hairs here and there. And we came across this bearded gentleman, and a big bulbous nose, and we were laughing, saying, hey, Dave, this one looks like you, and passing it around. And Annie looked at it, and when she looked at it, she went white. And we said, what? And she said, that's him. That's the man in the corner. So we ran in the kitchen to show it to my mother, and she didn't know who it was. And when my father got home, we asked him who it was, and it was his grandfather. It was Pa. He was the one who lived in that house and died in that upstairs room where we all slept. So that man in the corner wasn't, after all, a leprechaun, to my great dismay. But now I don't feel so bad about not getting a wish. But it was my great-grandfather there watching us, keeping an eye on things. Maybe that's why the slinky lady didn't come by. Maybe he was kind of looking out for us and keeping other things away. Not sure. Another time, oh, there were more. Do you want to hear more? Should I stop? It's been about a half hour. I'm going to keep going. So all these stories, by the way, I've written a book. Here's a little commercial break. It's on Parkhurst Publishing. It's supposed to come out September, depending on how things go with publishing and the state of the coronavirus. But the book will be out in hopefully September, so you can get lots more stories there. But don't worry, I'll tell you more right now. So let me tell you another story of something that happened in that house. Lots of things happened in that house. That house had a basement that, now I've been in basements that are creepy, and I've been in basements where I go in and I know there are ghosts in those basements. But there is nothing that compares to that basement. That basement was terrifying. It really was. There was a place in the wall. It had this big old furnace that had been converted from coal to natural gas or oil or something, I don't recall, and it was this giant furnace. And then there was a place in the wall of the basement. It was a brick wall with a roughly poured concrete floor. And there was a place in the basement wall where it was like decaying and crumbling, and bricks would always be falling out in just this one area, no place else. And, you know, my folks always said maybe there's something wet there, but there was nothing, you know, on the outside of the house there was nothing that was any different than any place else around the outside of the house. But in this one specific spot, the bricks just kept falling out for some reason. We used to avoid that basement as much as possible, but we would also, because we were little feral adrenaline junkies as kids, and we would be put out to the neighborhood in Chicago right after breakfast in the early morning, and we weren't allowed back in. She would make us drink out of the hose if we got thirsty, until lunchtime. And so we just played with the neighborhood kids, and this was 1960, 61. The place was lousy with kids. I mean, we were the boomers, and at that time there were just a bazillion of us, and we used to play this game where we would double dare each other to stand just inside the basement door. Now, the basement had a door that went down from the house, from the dining room, that went down these rickety old stairs, but on the other side there was a door that went to the outside, and there were just a few steps up, and then so you could go directly to the outside from the basement, from the far side of the basement, by some windows. And there were windows there, and you couldn't see the bricks falling out that part of the wall. But we would like dare each other to stand inside that door, and everybody else would wait outside counting 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, and see how long you could stand in there before banging on the door and say, "Let me out, let me out, let me out." And it was horrible. It was, I mean, what were we thinking? Oh my God, you had to, I remember standing there and thinking I was going to wet my pants. What I would do is like focus on the door. The idea was to like keep a connection to the outside world. The idea was to not look behind you, but you could feel things coming towards you. You could just feel it. You could just feel it getting closer and closer. And the trick was to wait until just before it got to your skin and yell, "Open the door!" And then they'd open the door and you'd go running out. And it was like, you know, I mean, it was terrible. We were, like I said, these little heathen adrenaline junkies. And one time we did that to one of our friends, Jimmy. And Jimmy was, he lived down at the end of the block, and he was an only child. This was a very, very, very unusual thing. In the early 1960s, most families had 30 or 40 children. I'm exaggerating, but not by much. But Jimmy loved to play with us, and we'd play all kinds of games all summer, and he'd hang with us. We were his posse. We were his gang. We called ourselves the Alley Cats. We were a gang. We weren't a violent gang. We were a gang of kids. And Jimmy would stand outside, horrified, as we would play this game, and he'd see, you'd come out, and our faces would be pure white ashen, and then you'd laugh and fall on the ground because you had this super adrenaline rush. Well, this one afternoon, we somehow convinced Jimmy to take a turn, and I don't know, it didn't seem like a good idea. We all knew how to do that. We all lived in that house. We all recognized when things started getting closer, and there was a really good chance he wouldn't, and we didn't know what would happen if we stayed there when they actually came close enough to touch us, or if, we didn't know if they would want to kill us, or it was we had no idea. We just knew that something very threatening, very dangerous was down there, and we're going to put this absolutely innocent little boy down in there. Now, the rule was the second you say, "Let me out," you open the door. That was the deal. And so we convinced him to go in the basement. And the minute he was in the basement, he started yelling, open the door," but instead of opening the door, my brother and one sister held the door shut. And he starts screaming, "Open the door," and he starts crying, and then he stopped. He was going, "Mama, Mama," and then he stopped, and that was it. It was like, "Get out of the way, open the door," and he was in this heap on the basement floor, and I was like, "Oh my God, what happened to you?" And I ran down there with my fists balled up like I was going to take on whatever was there, and he's like, "I want to go home, and I said, "I'm sorry, Jimmy, come on out, and you don't have to go home. We don't have to play this game anymore." And I looked at my brother and sister and just gave them this look, like, if you so much as make any comment about him and put him down in any way, I'm going to tell Mommy, and you're going to be in big trouble. And so we just went in Grandma Shipper's yard next door and hung out there. I didn't want him to go home right away because I just wanted to, I don't know, I felt really terrible about that. I still feel really guilty about that. That was just a terrible thing to do. Children can be so cruel. And I've never, ever done anything that cruel in my life again. And I never will. That really hurt my heart to do that. That put a real dark place in my heart. Some other thing, I should tell you. Well, yeah, I still have some time. I should tell you about. Okay. So this was just really weird. Things happened all the time in that house. The lights would go out. It had old electrical wires. I mean, the wiring was from when it was first electrified back before the turn of the century, probably. It was a fire trap, I'm sure. I remember my Uncle Jerry in the upstairs bedroom. There were two bedrooms that were connected by a closet, and there was like a trap door in between that closet between the two rooms. And there was wiring and stuff in there, and I remember it was all this cloth-covered wiring. Anyway, we were living there and plugging lots of things in outlets and stuff, but we survived. So I must have been maybe 7 or 8, and we all did dishes together. After supper, we would eat all together except for my father. He would always eat with a plate on his lap in the living room. He'd always eat a little later. He would go to law school during the week, and he couldn't then eat like at the time that we eat. So it must have been later in the fall or in the winter, because it was dark at supper time. And we finished supper, and my mom would rotate the chores. And you had to, everybody would have a different job. Some person would set the table, somebody would clear the table, somebody would wash the dishes, somebody would dry the dishes, somebody would put them away, and somebody else would sweep up the floor. And my mom would put any leftovers away that we had, which was not very often, or put together a plate for my dad. And I remember distinctly this was a Sunday night because my dad was home, and we had had supper, and for some reason that I do not recall, I had been in some kind of altercation with my sister. And her job, my little sister, and her job was to sweep the kitchen, and my job was to put the dishes away. Now, the best job of all, of course, was setting the table, because then you didn't have to do anything afterwards. Second best was clearing the table, because on Sunday nights we would all watch Lassie, our favorite TV show. Do 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 do. Remember that song? Anybody remember that? Anyway, so we had dinner, and everybody else was done. And I don't remember what was for dinner, but there were a buttload of pots and pans and big bowls. And a lot of the dishes had to go up high on the shelf by the sink. And so I pulled up a chair next to the sink, and I was putting stuff up. And my sister was sweeping the floor like a crazy person, and everybody else left the kitchen. And they all went to the living room. Now, if you were the first one, and there weren't enough couches or chairs for everyone to sit, so some kids had to sit on the floor. So the first one's done would get to sit on the couch, and then the last one's done would have to sit on the floor. And you also might end up alone in the kitchen on the far side of the house from where everybody else was, especially if your sister was ticked off at you and wouldn't stay with you. Now, usually we would wait for each other, and we would never leave one person alone, because the last one who left the kitchen had to turn off the light and then run like a crazy person into the living room to get out of the dark and with the rest of the family. Well, this time my sister was not going to wait for me, and I still had like 3 things to put away, and I had to get down and up, and I saw her pour the dirt from the floor into the trash bin, put the broom by the back door, and I begged her, please, just wait for me. I'm almost done. Don't go yet, as we heard the music from Lassie start. And she just shot me this look like, and she ran away, and there I was. And I was like, no fair. This is so unfair. And I felt like Cinderella and everything. And I climbed up on that chair, and I had a bowl in my hand. And I reached to put the bowl on the shelf, and I put it up on the shelf, and as soon as it was on the shelf, I'm standing on this chair with my back to the kitchen, and all the lights went out, pitch black. You couldn't see a thing, and I stood there on that chair, terrifyingly exposed, all alone in this room, with my family on the other side of the house. I didn't move. I couldn't move. I felt this thing coming closer. And I felt it like get this close, as if it was like tasting my soul. And I shivered. And I stood there, and I went like, oh, and I started to shake. And then I felt on the backs of my heels, the backs of my legs, I felt these icy fingers just slowly go up my body, and I could not move. I was completely frozen. It was like went up my body, up my back, on my neck. I could feel it. Felt like icy fingers just touching my body. And then I could feel my hair lift up, and it lifted up over my forehead. And when it was coming to my face, as soon as it got to my neck, I started going, Mommy, Mommy, and I could barely talk. Mommy, and it's going over my hair. And when it was coming down into my face, something in me some strength in me just mustered, and I shouted at the top of my lungs, Mommy! And she said, it's okay, darling. Come in here. The TV's still on. Well, as soon as I shouted, it was as if the power of my voice pushed it away. So it was like, it was gone. And I jumped off that chair. I flew like crazy. I crashed into the table or a chair in the dining room and went flying into the living room. Every other light in the house was out. My whole family was piled on the couch, facing the TV that is still on. And all the lights are out, but the TV is still on. And I jumped right into my mother's lap. I mean, the baby was sitting in her lap, but I jumped on and jostled the baby, and I scooched down in between my mother and father, made room for myself there. And we all kind of sat there while Lassie was still on the TV, and every light was out, and we're all looking around, and all the lights in the neighborhood are still on. Just our house. Just the lights. And my father starts shaking. We see his knees start to go, and he's going, oh, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And my mom and my mom says, I think somebody said, what happened? And my mom said, well, maybe it's just maybe it's a fuse. Dave, you want to go check the fuse box? And the look my father shot her was like, are you serious? And that's how I felt, because the fuse box was in the friggin' basement. So my father, in the light of the TV, with the sound of Lassie saving Timmy from a well or some such thing, my father goes into the dining room where there was this giant credenza that had come with the house. And he says, where's the flashlight? Where's the goddamn flashlight? And my mother said, it's right in the front, in the top drawer, Dave, you'll find it. So he rummages around in all the crap. I think every drawer in that credenza was a crap drawer. And he rummaged around, and finally he found this old flashlight, and he turns it on, and there's this dim beam, that just like, goes about 4 inches away from him. He's like, Jesus Christ. And he turns it off, and remember how you would bang the back of it? I have no idea what that would do, but anyway, my father would bang the back of the flashlight and then turn it on again, and it was a little bit stronger beam, it seemed, and he's just cussing up a blue streak like, son of a bitch, mother, goddamn son of a... And he's walking towards the basement door, shaking like a leaf. Now, we're all sitting on the couch, and we are watching my father, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, he is going in the basement in the dark alone? We weren't sure if he was going to come back up, and we hear him now we can watch him go, and he walked really slowly, and he got to that basement door, and to get to the basement door, you had to go through this like arch into the hallway. It was kind of weird. There was this hallway that ran alongside the stairs, and so that made an extra wall in the living room, the parlor room, and it had an archway on one side and an archway on the other, and the basement door was right through the archway off of the dining room. And so he disappeared in that archway. We could no longer see him. We could still hear him cussing under his breath, and we could see the flashlight beam, that was kind of moving as he's looking for we had this hook up high, and he's looking for the hook to do it, and we hear the hook unlatch, and sat just in total terror and silence, and heard the door knob click, and it started to open, and boom, all the lights went on. And he slammed that door shut. He ran, he tossed the flashlight into the still open drawer, came flying into the living room, jumped back down on the couch, and sat down there. Sweat was just like running off his brow. It was not warm in the house. Sweat was running off of his brow. And he's just sit down. He says, well, I guess everything's okay now. And then Annie, who always looked at things really scientifically, she said, how come all the lights went out and the TV stayed on? And there was a lamp that was actually plugged into the same outlet as the TV. That lamp went off, but the TV stayed on. And she said, I don't think the tubes in those old TV sets had tubes. I don't think the tubes would keep it going for this long. I don't think, why did that happen? And my mother just said, old wiring. And my father said, Jesus Christ. Yeah, that was, we still don't know how that happened. Many, many, many other things happened there. Many things that I don't want to speak out loud of, but that I did put in the book. One of the things I did, though, is, after we moved out, my Uncle Gerald moved in with his family. And I think, Grace, you and your family usually watch these stories, so I don't know if you remember this. You were pretty little, but I think your older brothers, maybe your sisters might remember. I don't know. But after we moved out, I remember going there once. It was months later, long time, maybe a year afterwards. And I felt really nervous about going because after we moved out, oh my gosh, it was so peaceful. I could sit by myself in a place and never hear my name called. I never felt something licking my soul or trying to, nothing in our new house. It was so quiet. It was so peaceful. We couldn't believe it. But we were going to visit at Uncle Gerald and Aunt Jeanette's. And I don't remember what the occasion was, but it was an afternoon, and must have been a Saturday afternoon. And we were there, and there were cocktails. Speaking of which, cheers. And I remember walking in, and it was the craziest thing. You know, you could, no matter how you felt walking up the stairs to that place, when you crossed that threshold, you all of a sudden just felt sad. You just felt like, ugh, something is wrong. You know, it like sucked the joy out of you, and just this penetrating sorrow. And I remember like standing in the dining room, like between the living room and the dining room, and I could see the basement door, and I noticed that the hook was not latched, and it worried me because there were little kids living there, and you had to keep that door latched because someone could die on those stairs or something could come up. I looked over through the hallway and up the stairs, and there was so much going on that I didn't expect to see the slinky lady, and I didn't. But as I was standing in that place between the rooms and not interacting with anybody, people were in the kitchen, people were in the living room, and I was just standing there. I felt that same thing from the kitchen that night start moving in close, and I knew it recognized me. I knew it knew how I tasted. And I felt this moving, closing in on me, just closing in on me. Until all of a sudden my cousin Joey pushed me from behind and says, Antoinette Marie! And I'm like, oh, thank God you're here. And then I had human beings to talk with, and I didn't allow myself to be alone. Till I had to go to the bathroom, and Aunt Jeanette, there was like a wait for the bathroom off the kitchen, and Aunt Jeanette suggested that I go upstairs, and I'm like, seriously? No, I'm not going upstairs by myself. So I just waited, and then as soon as I was in the bathroom, it was like as fast as I could get out of there. Every minute I was alone, I felt this thing was like, boom, it was coming at me. So we're getting ready to go, and my brother Tom, he was little, and he was best friends with his cousin Jimmy, who lived there. And he and Jimmy were like peas in a pod. They just loved each other so much. And they were playing and playing and playing, and they came and begged for Tommy to stay overnight with Jimmy. And I remember Kate and I, you know, we all knew what was going on there. This was after we moved, we started talking about the things that were going on in that house, how every night when you slept, you had to tuck every part of your body in, because anything that was out would be touched. That being woken in the night, being doors opening, seeing things. We knew what was there. And Jimmy and Tommy are begging for Tommy to spend the night, and my mom's like, okay, sure, that's a great idea. And we're like, are you insane? What are you doing? And then we guessed that they'd been living there for a while, so they would probably warn him about tucking his hands in and not having his back facing the room and all of the other things that could be seen as serious OCD, but were just protections that we did to keep ourselves safe living there. So Tommy stayed overnight, and the next morning he came back earlier than expected. And Aunt Jeanette brought him all the way back up to our house. And she said he just wanted to come home. He didn't sleep real well, and he was really tired, so he just wanted to come home. So I brought him home. We're like, okay. So my mom always every morning would ask, how'd you sleep? And so she asked Tommy, how'd you sleep? And he said, I don't want to stay over at Jimmy's anymore. And she said, why not? She said, well, somebody kept calling me, and when I turned over, they would tap me on my back, and then when I looked down, I think he was like sleeping on a bunk or something, that Jimmy was sleeping or pretend to be asleep, or he was sleeping, and I don't know who it was, but you shouldn't be tapping and waking people up in their sleep. I don't think I want to stay overnight there anymore. He said maybe Jimmy could stay here, then that won't happen, right, Mom? And we're all like, right, then that won't happen. So I don't know if Tom went and stayed there much anymore, but I know Jimmy came and stayed out with us a bunch. After, I'm just about out of time. I want to tell you, though, that years and years passed after the family had all moved out, and I went to Chicago with my friend Mary Sue, who I spoke of last week. He had a friend, Biber, from Berlin, who was doing some research on Holocaust survivors. And so we drove to Chicago and stayed with her at an apartment down in Hyde Park that was a professor, University of Chicago professor's apartment that was letting her stay there. They were out of the country. And so that night, over a bottle of wine, I was telling stories about Chicago, history. I love Chicago history and all this stuff. And then I started telling stories of the house on Pensacola Avenue. And as it turns out, the next day she had to interview a bunch of people that were near enough. And so we decided that after her interviews, we would go and drive by the old haunted house. And the places she went, I drove because I knew where the addresses were. I still knew the city, having lived there, and even as a grown-up. And so when all was finished, we drove by the house, and it was very different. It had been remodeled, where the big front porch was gone. It had new sidings. It had just had steep steps up with just a small porch, and it just didn't look the same at all. But it's still this really tall house. You still have to go up a bunch of steps to get to the front door. And we drove by real slowly, and I pointed out Jimmy's house, and I pointed out the neighbors, and we had places for stories that I told. And then we turned the corner and kind of cruised real slowly down the alley to look at the back. And the back had been completely changed too. They had built this gorgeous deck with a swimming pool you could kind of see in there. And then we just cruised past, and they said, boy, that doesn't look like a haunted house at all. And I'm like, yeah, no, it doesn't at all. So then we're back front, and there was a place to park right almost in front. And so instead of just cruising again, because I was still, they wanted to hear more about stuff, and I was pointing out which window was which room and where what happened in the house. We're sitting there parked, and then Mary Sue says, you should go up and knock at the door and tell them who you are. And I'm like, yeah, no way I'm doing that. She said, no, really, just go up and tell them that you used to live here. And that is just too creepy. I am not going to do that. Well, maybe, who knows? Maybe they've had stuff happen. I'm like, I'm not going to go up and say, have you been haunted in this house? But anyway, so they talked me into going up, and I made them come with. I went up and rang the doorbell, and this lovely gentleman answers. And he said, can I help you? And I said, hi, my name is T.I. Shippers. He said, Shippers? Are you one of the shippers who used to live here? And I'm like, yeah. He said, oh my gosh, I've got so many questions. And I was like, okay. He said, come in. You want to come in? We've totally redone the place. And he took us on a tour, and the whole ground floor had been opened up. The hallway was gone. So it was the living room and dining room were all one great room. The windows were bigger. There was light. There was all this wonderful stuff. But the stairwell went up, and it still curved around, although it looked different up there. There weren't the little rooms. There was like one big room upstairs. And he showed us the downstairs, the remodeled kitchen. And then he said, I got to show you upstairs. You're not going to believe upstairs. So I put my hand on the railing. And the minute I put my hand on the railing, everything was different. Except as soon as my hand touched that railing, I felt it. And I said, this is the same railing. And he said to me, wow, have you got a great memory? And I was thinking to myself, I think this is the house's memory. I didn't say that out loud. But upstairs, I didn't feel any ghosts. I didn't feel that icky thing. I didn't feel sad walking in. It felt very light and very, normal, which was such a relief. But he said that when they first moved in, before they started remodeling, that all kinds of things were happening, that all the neighbors warned them that they were buying a haunted house. And I'm like, seriously, it's legendary in the neighborhood, huh? And he said, did you have things happen? I said, yeah, we had things happen. And he said, well, we had lights that would go off, and we'd hear footsteps all the time, and there'd be all kinds of things that would happen. But after we finished remodeling, things just totally settled down. I think the ghosts just really like what we did with the place. Let me show you what we're going to do in the basement. We haven't done this yet, but we're going to fix the basement. Come on, I want to show you what we're going to do downstairs. And I'm like, and you should have seen Mary Sue and Bybert look at me like, the basement? And the basement door, okay, it was the same door. It was a narrower than standard door now. It was the same door handle. And when that door opened, the inside had never been painted. I swear to God, the little dirty fingerprints from my childhood were still on the inside of that door. Same steps, you went down, there's the coal bin, and the first 3 steps down, I got just this rush. It's like, okay, here's where everything is. And we went down, and they said they were going to dig out the foundation, and that there's places where the foundation is kind of cracking and crumbling. And I'm like, oh yeah, where? And they pointed to right where the bricks were falling out. You could see that it had been patched, and it was a place about as wide as a person, and it was all new brick there. And they said that the people in the neighborhood said that it was haunted, and they think there's maybe a treasure or something buried in the basement. And I said, yeah, I bet there is something buried in the basement. If you're going to look, I would look over in that area and point it to where the bricks were falling out. I can't keep telling this story because it's already after 11, but I could do a continuation of it, or you could just have to read the book and find out about what was in the basement. But as it turned out, the fellas who lived there were a couple of gay men, and we exchanged email addresses, and I said, if you ever have any questions, or if, feel free to get in touch with me. And they said the same, but you know how it is, we just never got back in touch. And then I don't know when they sold the house, what happened, but somebody else was buying the house, and a couple years or so ago, I saw that it was for sale again on Zillow, and they had one of those video tours of the place. And so I went and checked out the video tour, and it went through all the house and saw all the upgrades and the gorgeous backyard and blah, blah, blah. And then it went down to show the brand new high-efficiency furnace. And guess what? The basement had never been done. And as the camera is going through the basement to go to the furnace, you can't see it, just out of sight, I know that there are bricks and things coming out of the wall over on the side there, and they probably still are. So this has been over an hour tonight, and you all must be exhausted, and Like I say, lots more stories from that house. That's where it all got started. That's where I learned that there are things outside of what a lot of other people see. And once you know that, once you have seen that, you don't forget, and you can recognize it other places too. So that's my story for tonight. I think I'll stop there. Maybe on another night, if this thing goes longer, I have so many other stories to tell. I still have to tell the Roadhouse Saloon one of these days. And I have to tell the Piety Hill House story and several others. But meanwhile, be safe. Please don't get impatient and jump out into the world too soon. It's like, we're trying to starve this virus so it doesn't go to other people. And if you're feeling strong and healthy and like, even if you got it, you'd be fine, please know that if I got it, I wouldn't. And neither would Bunsey. And so if you care about people like me, or there are other people, your neighbors and other people that I'm sure you love and care about, just be patient. It won't be that much longer. We can do this. Stay safe. Wear a face mask when you're out. And wash your hands. I love you all. Have a good night. See you next week.